Michael Stewart stood at his own gate, jiggling the stubborn lock as the evening darkness settled around him. After a 14-hour shift at the hospital, his scrubs still bearing the faint stains of a particularly difficult day in the ER, all he wanted was to walk through his own backyard gate and collapse into bed. Instead, he found himself staring at a shiny new padlock that definitely hadn't been there when he left for work that morning. "What the hell?" he muttered, setting down his medical bag on the damp grass. This wasn't the first time the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association had gone too far, but it was certainly the most brazen. Michael had purchased the modest two-bedroom bungalow 6 months ago, attracted by the mature trees and the privacy fence that enclosed a yard perfect for his aging golden retriever, Charlie. The property backed onto a community green space, a feature the realtor had highlighted as a selling point. The private gate allowing access to the shared area had been one of the reasons Michael had chosen this particular house. He pulled out his phone and called Diane Porter, the current HOA president. Even at 9:30 p.m., he knew she'd answer. Diane prided herself on her 24/7 availability for community concerns. What she really meant was 24/7 availability to police the neighborhood for infractions of the Byzantine aHOA regulations. "Michael," she answered on the second ring, her voice crisp with rehearsed pleasantness. "What can I do for you this evening?" "Someone's padlocked my back gate," he said, exhaustion making his voice rougher than intended. "I need it removed immediately." "Ah, yes. The board voted this afternoon. All private access points to the community green space have been secured pending the new usage agreement. You should have received an email about this." Michael rubbed his temples, feeling his blood pressure spike. "I've been in surgery since 5 a.m. dying in. I haven't checked my email. And you can't just lock people out of their own property without proper notice." "It's not your property, Michael," Diane replied, her voice taking on the condescending tone he'd come to recognize. "If you read Section 47.3 of the covenant you signed, you'll note that while the gate exists on your property line, the access rights to the community areas are at the discretion of the board." "That's ridiculous," Michael said, kicking the fence in frustration. "I need to get into my house." "Your front door is perfectly accessible," Diane responded. The board felt that unrestricted access was contributing to the decline in property values. 3 unauthorized dogs were spotted in the green space just last week. One of those unauthorized dogs had been Charlie, who had a habit of slipping out when Michael's sister came to check on him during long shifts. The HOA had already issued 2 warnings about it. "I'm cutting this lock off," Michael stated flatly. "That would be destruction of aHOA property," Diane countered smoothly. "Section 22.1 clearly prohibits homeowners from." "I've been on my feet for 14 hours saving lives," Michael interrupted. "I'm going through my gate to my house. I'll have to call security if you damage aHOA property," Diane threatened. Michael laughed harshly. "Security? You mean retired Mr. Henley who drives around in a golf cart? Call whoever you want. Don't test me on this, Michael." The board has unanimously. Michael ended the call and stared at the padlock. His neighbor, Alina Rodriguez, had warned him about the HOA when he moved in. "They're drunk on the tiniest bit of power," she'd said. "God help anyone who plants the wrong color flowers." He hadn't taken her seriously enough. From inside the fence, he heard Charlie's whining. The dog could sense his presence but couldn't reach him. Something in Michael snapped. After a day of making life-or-death decisions, being locked out of his own backyard by a petty neighborhood dictator was the final straw. He pulled a pair of trauma shears from his bag, the heavy-duty kind that could cut through a penny. As he positioned them around the padlock's shackle, headlights swept across the fence. A vehicle was pulling up alongside the green space. Little did Michael know, the next 10 minutes would change everything about his life in Oak Ridge Estates. Michael froze, trauma shears poised mid-air as the vehicle came to a stop. The headlights cut through the darkness, casting his shadow long against the fence. A car door slammed, followed by the unmistakable crackle of a police radio. "Sir, I'm going to need you to put down whatever tool you're holding." The officer's voice was firm but not aggressive. "Keep your hands visible, please." Michael slowly lowered the shears and turned around, squinting into the glare of a flashlight. The beam danced across his scrubs, lingering on the hospital ID badge still clipped to his chest. "Officer, I live here," Michael explained, fatigue evident in his voice. "This is my gate to my house, and someone put a lock on it without my permission." The police officer, a woman in her mid-30s with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, approached cautiously. Her name tag read Martinez. Behind her, a second officer remained by the patrol car, hand resting casually near his holster. "I received a call about property damage and potential trespassing," Officer Martinez said, lowering her flashlight slightly. "Can I see some ID that confirms this is your residence?" Michael reached for his wallet, movements deliberate and slow. "My ID has my address. The gate connects my backyard to the community green space. I used it every day for 6 months until the HOA decided to lock it today without proper notice. As he handed over his driver's license, a silver SUV pulled up behind the police cruiser. Diane Porter emerged, clutching a tablet and wearing an expression that mixed concern and satisfaction in equal measure. "Officers, thank goodness you're here so quickly," she called out, hurrying toward them in practical heels that somehow didn't sink into the soft grass. "I'm Diane Porter, Oak Ridge Estates HOA president." Officer Martinez glanced at Michael's ID and then at the house behind the fence. "Mr. Stewart, it appears your address does match. Can you explain exactly what's happening here?" Before Michael could respond, Diane interjected, "The homeowner is attempting to destroy HOA property. That lock was installed according to bylaws voted on by the board this afternoon." "Without notice," Michael countered, his patience wearing thinner by the second. "I came home from a 14-hour shift to find myself locked out of my own property. My dog is inside, and I need to get to him." As if on cue, Charlie's anxious whining became more pronounced, followed by desperate scratching at the inside of the fence. The second officer approached now, a stocky man with a salt and pepper mustache. His nameplate identified him as Officer Ramirez. "Ma'am," Ramirez addressed Diane, "did you provide proper notice to the homeowners before changing access to their property?" Diane bristled slightly. "We sent an email this afternoon after the emergency board meeting. All actions were taken in accordance with Section 47.3 of the covenant, which Mr. Stewart signed when purchasing the property." "An email sent while I was in surgery," Michael added, his exhaustion giving way to simmering anger. "I've received no physical notice, no letter, nothing posted on my door, just a lock appearing out of nowhere." Officer Martinez handed Michael back his ID. "Mr. Stewart, do you have a copy of this covenant?" "I'd like to see the section she's referring to." "It's inside my house, which I can't access because of the lock," Michael replied, gesturing toward the fence. Diane tapped at her tablet. "I have a digital copy right here, officers. Section 47.3 clearly states." She was interrupted by the arrival of another car. Elena Rodriguez, Michael's neighbor from 2 doors down, emerged with purpose in her stride. At 57, Elena was a retired attorney who had moved to Oak Ridge Estates 3 years earlier and had been battling with the HOA ever since. "Michael, I saw the police car and came to check what was happening," she said, then nodded to the officers. "Elena Rodriguez, former counsel with Parker and Mitchum. I still have my bar card if you need to see it." Diane's expression soured. "This doesn't concern you, Elena." "Actually, it does," Elena countered. "I'm on the HOA board, and I was the sole vote against this ridiculous measure this afternoon." "Michael, they didn't achieve the 2/3 majority required for emergency implementation of new security measures. The vote was 4-1, and our bylaws require at least 5-0 for immediate action without the standard 30-day notice period." Officer Martinez looked between the 2 women, clearly reassessing the situation. "So there's a dispute about whether the lock was legally placed according to your own HOA rules." "There's no dispute," Diane insisted, her voice rising slightly. "The board acted within its authority to secure common areas." Elena pulled out her phone. "I recorded the meeting, as is my right as a board member. I can play the section where you specifically acknowledge that the vote wasn't sufficient for emergency implementation, but decided to proceed anyway." The atmosphere shifted palpably. Officer Ramirez glanced at his partner, a silent exchange of understanding passing between them. Michael felt a glimmer of hope as he realized the power dynamic was beginning to tilt away from Diane. Charlie's whining had become more desperate now, and Michael's concern for his elderly dog was growing by the minute. "Officers," Michael said quietly, "my dog needs medication for his arthritis. It's inside, and he's already overdue for his evening dose. Please, can we resolve this so I can tend to him?" As Diane began to protest again, Officer Martinez held up her hand. "Ma'am, I think we need to hear that recording before proceeding any further." Elena's phone screen illuminated her face as she scrolled to find the recording. The small group stood in a tense semicircle, the police cruiser's flashing lights painting everyone in alternating blue and red. Charlie's whimpering had become more persistent, the sound tugging at Michael's heart. "Here it is," Elena said, tapping the screen. She increased the volume to maximum before pressing play. The recording was surprisingly clear, capturing the stiff formality of the HOA emergency meeting. After several minutes of procedural discussion, Diane's voice emerged unmistakably from the device. "The motion to secure all private access points to the green space has received 4 votes in favor, 1 against. Elena, your objection is noted for the record." Another voice, male, somewhat hesitant, spoke up. "Don't we need unanimous approval for emergency implementation? The bylaws state that the board can act in the interest of community safety and property values," Diane interrupted. "We've had 3 unauthorized animals in the common area this week alone. One was that doctor's golden retriever again." Still, the male voice persisted without unanimous approval. We should follow standard procedure: 30 days notice, community comment period, then implementation. Roger, if you're uncomfortable, you can abstain from the installation team, Diane replied dismissively. We have the locks already purchased from the security budget. James and I will handle the installation this evening. Better to ask forgiveness than permission when property values are at stake. Elena stopped the recording and looked pointedly at Diane, whose face had flushed even in the dim evening light. That's taken completely out of context, Diane sputtered. Elena has been trying to undermine the board since she joined. Officer Martinez's expression had hardened. Ma'am, it sounds like your own board member raised concerns about proper procedure, which you dismissed. And you specifically mentioned targeting that doctor's dog, Michael added, anger finally overtaking his exhaustion. This was personal. Diane straightened her posture. This is a civil matter between the HOA and a resident. I don't see why police resources are being wasted. You called us, ma'am, Officer Ramirez reminded her dryly. For destruction of property. He was about to cut the lock. Diane gestured at Michael's trauma shears, which now rested on the ground beside his medical bag. Officer Martinez turned to Michael. Sir, is there another way for you to access your property? The front door, yes, Michael admitted. But my dog has been alone all day while I was performing emergency surgeries. He's elderly and needs medication. And frankly, this is my property and my gate. The HOA had no right to restrict my access, especially without proper notice. Elena stepped forward. Officers, as a board member and former attorney, I can confirm that the HOA's actions tonight violated not only our own bylaws but possibly state property laws. Emergency measures require unanimous board approval specifically to prevent this kind of unilateral action. Officer Martinez nodded thoughtfully before addressing Diane. Ma'am, based on what we've heard, it appears proper procedures weren't followed. I suggest you remove the lock immediately to avoid any potential civil liability. I don't have the key with me, Diane replied, her voice tight. James Henderson has it, and he's not answering his phone. Michael had reached his limit. Officers, I've been on my feet for 14 hours. I have the tools to remove this unauthorized lock, and I'm going to use them to access my property and care for my pet. If Ms. Porter wants to pursue this further, she can do so through proper channels, with 30 days' notice. Officer Ramirez exchanged a glance with his partner, then gave a slight nod. Mr. Stewart, under the circumstances, we won't prevent you from accessing your property. But I'd advise documenting the condition of the gate and lock before and after for your own protection. Elena was already recording with her phone. I've got it covered, Michael. Diane's face contorted with indignation. This is outrageous. The HOA has clear authority too. The HOA has clear procedures it must follow, Elena interrupted. Procedures you deliberately ignored, as evidenced by your own words in that recording. By now, lights had come on in neighboring houses. Several residents had emerged onto their porches, watching the scene unfold. Michael recognized Mrs. Patel from across the green space and the Hendersons from the corner lot. Even Mr. Finch, a retired judge who rarely engaged with neighborhood drama, stood observing from his driveway. Michael picked up his trauma shears, positioned them carefully on the padlock's shackle, and squeezed. The hardened steel blades sliced through the metal with surprising ease. The severed lock fell to the ground with a dull thud. Charlie's excited barking erupted as Michael swung the gate open. The elderly golden retriever limped toward him, tail wagging frantically despite obvious discomfort. Michael dropped to his knees, burying his face in the dog's soft fur, suddenly not caring about the audience or the conflict. I'll be filing a formal complaint, Diane announced to no one in particular. This isn't over. Officer Martinez handed Michael her card. Sir, if you experience any further issues, please don't hesitate to call. We'll include all the details in our report. As the small crowd of neighbors watched, Diane retreated to her SUV, phone already pressed to her ear. The officers returned to their cruiser but remained parked, writing up their report with occasional glances toward the scene. Elena approached Michael as he gathered his medical bag. This has been building for months. It's not just about your gate. Michael looked up, Charlie leaning heavily against his leg. What do you mean? Elena's expression was grim. Diane's husband is a real estate developer. They've been trying to find ways to pressure certain homeowners to sell, particularly properties with green space access like yours. I think it's time the community knew exactly what's been happening in those closed board meetings. Michael stared at his neighbor, the implications slowly sinking in through his exhaustion. You're saying this isn't just HOA power tripping. There's an actual agenda. Oh, there's definitely an agenda, Elena confirmed. And after tonight, I think people might finally be ready to listen. As Michael led Charlie through the gate toward his home, he felt the eyes of his neighbors following him. The simple act of walking through his own gate had somehow become a pivotal moment not just for him, but for the entire Oak Ridge Estates community. The battle lines had been drawn, and Michael had unwittingly become the central figure in a neighborhood war that had been brewing long before he cut that padlock. The next morning, Michael woke to the sound of his doorbell. He had finally fallen asleep around 2 a.m. after tending to Charlie, reviewing the police report Officer Martinez had emailed, and taking a long, hot shower to wash away the previous day's exhaustion. The clock read 7:36 a.m., barely 5 hours of sleep. Groaning, he pulled on a t-shirt and shuffled to the door, Charlie limping loyally behind him. When he opened it, he was surprised to find not one person, but 7 of his neighbors standing on his front porch. Mrs. Patel stood at the front, a plate of homemade samosas in her hands. Behind her were the Hendersons, Mr. Finch, a young couple Michael recognized but hadn't met, and 2 elderly sisters who lived at the far end of the community. "Good morning, Dr. Stewart," Mrs. Patel said warmly. "We hope we're not disturbing you, but after what happened last night, we wanted to come by." Michael blinked, still processing. "Please, call me Michael." "And it's fine. I was just surprised." "We all were," John Henderson said, stepping forward. "Surprised by what the aHOA tried to pull. Elena told us about the recording." Michael opened the door wider, inviting them in. Charlie greeted each neighbor with a gentle sniff as they filed into his modest living room, which still had moving boxes stacked in one corner. Michael had been too busy at the hospital to fully settle in over the past 6 months. "I didn't realize this would become such a neighborhood event," Michael admitted, accepting Mrs. Patel's samosas with gratitude. "It's been building for some time," Mr. Finch said, his voice carrying the measured tone of his former judicial career. "Diane and her select board members have been gradually overstepping their authority. Your gate was simply the most blatant example." The young woman Michael didn't know well introduced herself. "I'm Rebecca Torres. My wife and I moved in 3 months ago. Last week, the HOA fined us $200 because our moving truck left tire impressions on our own lawn." Her wife added, "We paid it because we didn't want trouble. Now I'm thinking we should have fought back." As they shared stories, a clear pattern emerged. Over the past year, the aHOA under Diane's leadership had become increasingly aggressive with enforcement, particularly targeting newer homeowners and those with properties in desirable locations. Special assessments have mysteriously increased for certain sections of the neighborhood, always justified with vague references to community enhancement. "Elena mentioned something about Diane's husband being a developer?" Michael asked, pouring coffee for his unexpected guests. Mr. Finch nodded. "Robert Porter. He's with Meridian Development Group. They've been buying up properties in communities like ours, consolidating lots and building luxury condominiums." "The timing is suspicious," John Henderson added. "The aHOA harassment started ramping up right after Meridian completed a development 2 miles from here. Their next project was rumored to be in this area." Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Diane called emergency board meeting for noon. Already plotting damage control. We'll record everything. Community update meeting at my house 3 p.m. He showed the message to his neighbors, who exchanged knowing looks. "We should all be there," Mrs. Patel said firmly. "This affects everyone." The doorbell rang again. This time it was a courier with an official-looking envelope. Michael signed for it and opened it while his neighbors watched. "Notice of violation," he read aloud. "Homeowner Michael Stewart has violated Section 22.1 of the Oak Ridge Estates Covenant by willfully destroying aHOA property. A special assessment of $500 is hereby levied for replacement of security equipment and administrative costs. Additionally, unauthorized animal access to common areas has resulted in a $250 fine as per Section 34.7. The letter was signed by Diane Porter and included a notice that failure to pay within 7 days would result in a lion being filed against his property." "This is ridiculous," Rebecca's wife exclaimed. After what the police witnessed, Mr. Finch took the letter, examining it with his experienced eye. "This won't hold up. The police report clearly states the lock was placed without proper authorization." "That's not stopping her from trying," Michael said, rubbing his temples. The headache that had been building since last night was intensifying. John Henderson put a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You're not alone in this fight anymore. I think it's time we called for a special election of the board." The elderly sisters, who had been quietly observing until now, finally spoke up. Martha, the older one, leaned forward on her cane. "We've lived here for 15 years. The original covenant was meant to preserve property values and community standards, not to harass homeowners into selling." Her sister Edith nodded. "We've been watching which properties get targeted. It's always the ones with the best views, corner lots, or, like yours, access to the green space. Robert Porter doesn't just want a few properties," Martha continued. "Based on the pattern, we think he wants to redevelop the entire southern section of Oak Ridge Estates." The implications were staggering. What had seemed like typical aHOA overzealousness was actually a coordinated strategy to pressure homeowners into selling to a developer with inside access. Michael's phone rang, the hospital calling. He excused himself to answer it. When he returned, his expression was grim. "I need to go in. There's been a multi-car accident on the highway, and they need all available trauma surgeons." His neighbors rose to leave, but not before exchanging contact information and confirming their attendance at Elena's afternoon meeting. As they filed out, Mrs. Patel stopped at the door. "Dr. Stewart, Michael, we're glad you cut that lock. Sometimes it takes one person standing up to start something important." After they left, Michael quickly changed into fresh scrubs. As he grabbed his keys, he noticed a car slowing down in front of his house, Robert Porter's luxury sedan with Diane in the passenger seat. They were clearly surveying the unusual amount of activity at his home. Michael stared directly at them through the window, making no effort to hide his contempt. After a moment, the car accelerated away. As he headed to the hospital, Michael realized that cutting a simple padlock had unknowingly made him the catalyst for exposing a scheme that affected dozens of families. The question now was whether the community could organize fast enough to counter the Porters' next move. Whatever happened at Elena's meeting that afternoon would determine whether Oak Ridge Estates remained a neighborhood of homes or became Robert Porter's next development opportunity. The emergency room was chaos. 3 critically injured patients from the highway pileup had arrived simultaneously, and Michael had been in surgery for nearly 4 hours. As he scrubbed out after the final procedure, his thoughts kept drifting back to Oak Ridge Estates. He checked his phone to find 17 text messages and 9 missed calls, all from neighbors. Elena's message stood out. Emergency meeting was intense. Porters showed up unannounced. "You need to see this footage. Community meeting moved to Henderson's backyard 6 p.m. Can you make it?" Michael glanced at the clock, 5:22 p.m. If he left now, he'd just make it. He texted a quick confirmation and stopped by his supervisor's office. "Dr. Patel, the Bennett patient is stabilized, and I've completed the handoff to the ITU team. Any chance I could leave a bit early? I've got a situation at home." His supervisor looked up from her computer. "I heard about your HOA troubles. My sister had similar issues in her neighborhood." She waved him off. "Go. The next shift is already here, and you've been here since dawn." "Thank you," Michael said, relieved. "I owe you one." "Just make sure that dog of yours gets his medication on time," she replied with a knowing smile. 30 minutes later, Michael pulled into John Henderson's driveway. The street was lined with cars. It looked like half the neighborhood had turned out. As he made his way to the backyard, he was struck by the transformation that had occurred in less than 24 hours. What had been a personal confrontation at his gate had catalyzed the entire community. The Henderson's spacious backyard was filled with folding chairs arranged in a semicircle. At least 40 residents were present, with more arriving. Elena stood at a makeshift podium consisting of a music stand and a small table. She was in deep conversation with Mr. Finch and another man Michael didn't recognize. "Michael," John called, waving him over. "Glad you made it. Things have escalated significantly." "What happened at the emergency board meeting?" Michael asked as John led him to a seat near the front. John's expression darkened. "Diane tried to push through a special assessment for enhanced security measures for the entire community, $2,000 per household, due within 30 days. $2,000. Michael was stunned. "That's outrageous." "That's the point," replied Mrs. Patel. Witt turned around from the row in front. "Those who can't pay would face liens and eventually foreclosure, making their properties available for purchase." Elena approached, tablet in hand. "Michael, thank goodness. You need to see what happened when the Porters realized I was recording the emergency meeting." She handed him her tablet with the video queued up. The footage showed a stereo conference room at the community center. Diane stood at the head of the table, with 4 other board members seated around it, including Elena. "The security assessment is necessary given recent events," Diane was saying. "Certain residents have demonstrated blatant disregard for community rules, and we must take decisive action." "By certain residents, you mean Dr. Stewart," Elena challenged on the recording. "His actions merely highlighted a broader security concern," Diane replied smoothly. Then the conference room door opened and Robert Porter entered. He wasn't a board member and had no official role in the HOA. "I've brought the security proposal documentation," he announced, placing a folder on the table. He noticed Elena's phone recording and frowned. "Is that necessary?" "Board meetings are required to be recorded in our bylaws," Elena replied. Section 4.2. Robert's expression hardened. "Diane, a word outside, please." The video showed them stepping out. When they returned moments later, Diane's demeanor had changed completely. "This meeting is adjourned until further notice," she announced abruptly. "The board needs time to review additional documentation before voting on the security assessment." Elena's voice came from behind the camera. "You need a majority vote to adjourn without action." "Then I move to adjourn," said James, the same hesitant voice from the previous recording. "Second," added another board member quickly. "Those in favor?" Diane asked, and 3 hands went up, not including Alina's. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Diane gathered her papers hurriedly. As the board members dispersed, Robert approached Elena directly, his face filling the. Michael's car screeched to a halt in his driveway, John and Rebecca pulling in right behind him. As they rushed toward the house, the beam of a flashlight swept across the backyard near the gate, exactly where the confrontation had begun 4 days earlier. Call 911, Michael instructed Rebecca, who already had her phone out. He and John approached cautiously around the side of the house. In the dim evening light, they could make out 2 figures by the gate. One was attaching something to the fence while the other held a flashlight. Hey, John called out sharply. What are you doing there? The figure startled and the flashlight beam swung wildly before settling on Michael and John. Behind it stood James Henderson, not the whistleblower from the meeting, but his son, a college student home on break. Next to him was a younger man Michael didn't recognize. What's going on, James? Michael demanded, cautiously approaching. The young man lowered the flashlight, looking surprisingly unalarmed. Dr. Stewart, we're installing your security camera. Didn't my dad tell you? Michael and John exchanged confused glances. Your father didn't mention anything about a camera, Michael replied. He called about an hour ago, said it was urgent, James explained. Asked us to install this security system for you right away. Said you'd be home soon and to tell you it was part of the protection plan the group discussed. The second young man held up a small wireless camera. We've got 4 of these to set up around your property. Extra security since you've been targeted. Relief washed over Michael as Rebecca joined them, phone still in hand. False alarm, he told her. They're friends, not intruders. A patrol car pulled up in front, lights flashing but no siren. Officer Ramirez emerged, hand resting near his holster. Everything all right, Dr. Stewart, he called. Dispatch said there might be trespassers. Michael walked over to explain the situation. As Officer Ramirez was taking notes, another vehicle turned onto the street, Diane Porter's silver SUV. It slowed as it passed Michael's house, Diane clearly observing the police presence. Instead of continuing, the SUV pulled to the curb. Robert Porter emerged from the passenger side and approached with manufactured concern. Is everything all right, officer? We were just driving by and noticed the police car. Officer Ramirez regarded him coolly. Everything's fine, sir. Just responding to a call that turned out to be a misunderstanding. Robert's gaze shifted to Michael, then to the young men installing the security camera by the gate. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. I see you're making some improvements to your property, Dr. Stewart, he observed, his tone carefully neutral. I hope you submitted the proper forms to the Architectural Review Committee. Security installations require prior approval under Section 17.4 of the Covenant. Before Michael could respond, John Henderson stepped forward. Actually, Robert, emergency security measures are exempt from prior approval under Section 17.43, especially when the homeowner has documented evidence of being targeted for harassment. Robert's practiced smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you're implying. I think you do, Michael said quietly. Just like I think you know why Assistant District Attorney Chen is currently reviewing evidence of conspiracy and fraud involving you, your wife, and Meridian Development. A color drained from Robert's face. Diane had emerged from the SUV and was walking toward them, but she stopped abruptly when she saw her husband's expression. I don't know what James told you, Robert began, his voice low and threatening, but he's been under tremendous stress lately. Whatever recordings he provided were likely taken out of context or possibly even doctored. Officer Ramirez, who had been listening intently, stepped closer. Mr. Porter, are you saying you're aware of recordings that might suggest illegal activity? I'd be interested in hearing more about that. Robert backpedaled quickly. I'm merely speculating about what false accusations might have been made. There's nothing false about the recordings, Robert, came a new voice. James Henderson Sr. walked up the driveway, accompanied by Elena and Commissioner Walters. I just finished giving my sworn statement to the district attorney. They're executing a search warrant on the HOA office and your home as we speak. As if to confirm his words, Robert's phone buzzed. He checked it, his face growing ashen. Diane, he called sharply. We need to go. Now. But Diane remained frozen on the sidewalk, seemingly unable to process the rapid unraveling of their carefully constructed plan. It's over, Robert, Commissioner Walters stated firmly. Ms. Chen is filing for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning to invalidate all the recent lines and prevent any further HOA actions until the investigation is complete. You can't do that, Diane finally spoke, her voice rising with indignation. The HOA has legal authority. The HOA does, Elena interrupted. But when that authority is abused as part of a criminal conspiracy, those actions can be invalidated. Officer Ramirez's radio crackled with an incoming message. After listening briefly, he addressed Robert directly. "Mr. Porter, I've been instructed to inform you that investigators would like to speak with you regarding potential charges of conspiracy, fraud, and abuse of power. They're requesting you come to the station voluntarily, or they can come to you with a formal arrest warrant." Robert's composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous. We've done nothing illegal. We simply enforce the covenant that everyone signed willingly. If people can't afford to live in a premium community, that's hardly our fault. And if certain people became unable to afford it because you deliberately targeted them with excessive fines and assessments," Michael challenged. "What would you call that, Robert?" "Smart business," Robert snapped, his mask of civility completely gone. "Do you have any idea what that land is worth? What these properties could become? Instead, they're wasted on middle-class families and outdated homes who don't appreciate the potential value."